What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be building an awesome 4K gaming PC build for 2023 and beyond. Featuring an RTX 4080, AMD's new 7800 X3D processor, and a case from MSI with a touchscreen, this build is going to be hopefully a little bit special. As always, I'll be running you guys through all the parts that make this build possible, assembling it as we go, and looking at performance a little bit later. Let's do this. The Cooler Master Tempest GP27U gaming monitor is a stunning quantum dot mini LED monitor that boasts a huge 576 local dimming zones. The crisp, high-resolution 4K panel provides stacks of detail and is backed up by a competitive 160Hz refresh rate. With a 1 millisecond response time, 27-inch form factor, and HDMI 2.1 support to run the latest consoles up to 4K 120Hz, it really does tick a lot of boxes. You can learn more about the GP27U at the first link in the description below. I'm going to start things off by looking at the motherboard and the CPU first. It's always a good idea to install as many components as possible into the motherboard before you get the case and some of your other components involved later. Now, this is AMD's Ryzen 7800 X3D. It's a chip that adds AMD's X3D cache with nearly 100 meg of level 3 cache to really accelerate gaming performance. It takes what was already a fairly solid Ryzen 7000 architecture and accelerates it to the stratosphere and beyond. It basically makes it competitive against Intel's 13th gen, and actually better in the case of the 7800 X3D than its Intel rival for gaming. Now, of course, for a chip like this that likes to be overclocked, likes lots of power, you want to buy an X670 motherboard. Now, preferably, I'd recommend an X670E design. Now, this motherboard is slightly mental, it has to be said, and when it first launched was, sorry MSI, overpriced. Thankfully, things have got a bit better. Motherboards on the X670E chipset have got cheaper, and while this is by no means a cheap option per se, let's look at the features that help it to justify the price tag. Massive bulky backplate on the back to protect the PCB. Loads and loads of VRM cooling with plenty of phases for overclocking. If we spin around to the rear, you'll also see the I/O is pretty mega. Everything from 20 gigabit USB-C to mini DisplayPort to high capacity normal USBs and Wi-Fi 6E. You'll also find a cool little toolless M.2 heatsink, that's the word I was looking for, that supports Gen 5 SSDs and is also in a really cool place on the board. I don't want to get too distracted though with our M.2 drives because it is time to install the CPU. Now, all you need to do is lift up the retention arm, pull back the socket like so, and drop the Ryzen chip in with the Ryzen text sort of reading in the same way as all the other text on the motherboard. Add the cover in, gently put the retention arm into the socket, and pull off the plastic cover, a little something like so. I'm also going to pop the RAM in at this stage. I've picked up a 32GB kit of Corsair's Vengeance RGB. I was going to say Pro, but it's basically just the DDR5, but AMD specific. So you've got 6,000 megahertz clock speed, cast latencies are fairly low. Super simple, just need to pull back the second and fourth DIMM slot clips before sliding the Vengeance memory in. Line up the notches, bit of pressure, same as DDR4, but obviously physically the notch is in a slightly different place, meaning the two kits aren't backwards compatible. Once this has been done, the M.2 SSD is next up. I'm going to use the toolless Gen 5 slot in this build just to demonstrate how it works, but if you are planning on adding a Gen 5 drive in future, it might be worth using one of the slower Gen 4 slots to keep this one free. I'll be installing into this slot the... Where's it gone? Ah, there we are, the Seagate FireCuda 530. One of my favourite Gen 4. One of my favourite, let's try all of that again. This is the Seagate FireCuda 530, one of my favourite PCI Gen 4 NVMe drives. A really, really strong drive. You've got great performance metrics, 7.5 to 8 gigabytes a second read and write. Really, really fantastic. Then I just pop the heatsink cover back on. It is a little bit fiddly from time to time, but not too bad. Bit of pressure, I'm getting the hang of this, and that is all you need to do. So no screwdriver required for any of the M.2 installation. Now, I was a little bit torn in terms of which cooler I wanted, continue the MSI theme and add in something like their MEG Liquid 360, but I've been loving this DeepCool one recently. Really, really like the aesthetic. The fans are great, the price is great. I'll link this alongside all the other parts today down below. So let's have a look, shall we, at how we're exactly this installs for an AMD CPU. So by the looks of things, I need to remove the included stock plastic brackets and add these 4 screws on instead. The rest of the mounting procedure can wait until later, but trust me, taking these fiddly brackets off now while everything's out the case is way easier. The net result is that you should end up with something a little bit like this. We've got our processor, all the mounting hardware, memory, and SSD all nicely installed. Once this is done, it's finally then time to introduce the case. Now this is a little bit special. Let me bring it over. Because it's the MSI Prospect 700R. Now, not only is it absolutely huge, supporting E80X motherboards, which I didn't actually realize our board is E80X, but it also supports mega graphics card clearance. It's on the back here, up to 400 millimeters, USB 3s, we've got USB-C on the front panel, and a touchscreen. Now, I haven't actually seen this case in person yet, so it's enough talking, and it's about time I actually see whether this thing cuts the mustard. It's also showing off just quite how short I am, which has been embarrassing, really. In terms of opening it up, the door is massive. It is, hopefully, yes, removable. That's a very nice touch. And in theory, the same on the other side. Yeah, good. This is a good start. And inside contains even more goodies. We've got a triple slot PCIe riser card. This is actually going to be very good because it means we can put the Suprim graphics card in vertically. Now, inside of this box here, we have the riser cable needed to connect up the riser to the graphics card. Once that's been done, you can see just how bespoke this is, so I'm not sure you're going to have much luck with an aftermarket non-stock riser, but the included one is good to go. Before any of that though, really, I need to pop the motherboard into place. Now that's pretty easy. It's an E80X case and an E80X motherboard, so all the screws are going to be located in the right places. So we've got 9 screws to go in, 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom, and then I'll add the riser in by removing the existing PCI lanes and getting it all screwed together. But looking good so far. I've got to give credit where it's due. That might be the easiest and most kind of flush PCI riser I've ever installed. Normally they don't feel like they sit too securely. This bolts down perfectly to the case frame. Really, really good. Cooler is going to be next. Let me grab it. I am going to pop it at the top with the fans in exhaust mode. That's going to give us a slightly positive but still fairly neutral air pressure with 3 fans bringing air in and 4 exhausting out the rear. In order to do this, I need to obviously remove the top panel of the case. There is a handle. Then that whole thing, yes, lovely, will just clip out. Dust filter will also come off. Nice. And I'll be installing, of course, the fans underneath the radiator. So the fans are going to go onto the rad first, and then the whole rad fan assembly is going to clip into the case. But not before I've just finished installing the water block. So a couple of brackets to go onto the water block itself. That then slots onto the posts around the CPU we installed earlier, before finally the radiator installation concludes the whole CPU cooler. Actually really, really simple from DeepCool, and I like this system a lot. And once that's all done, the graphics card is finally going to come into play. Now, I'm not particularly ecstatic that cards like this cost as much as they do. The performance is still very good, and I really like the Suprim cooler that MSI now include on many of their high-end GPUs. Take a look at that. Now, this is a triple slot beast. You can see it takes up 3 PCI lanes with a little bit of extra on the top. You've got 3 large fans, plenty of RGB, and a gorgeous backplate that actually also illuminates too. The only thing I don't really like about these next-gen GPUs is the ugly power splitters, but we don't actually need to use this, as instead we'll be opting for a PCIe Gen 5 compatible power supply. If I had to give MSI some surface level feedback, it would be the Suprim mousepad is a nice touch, and I understand why it's this kind of size because of the size of the box, but totally useless. Give me like at least an extended one or one big enough for a mouse. It's a shame because I'd actually use it. Anyway, besides the point, not really the most important part of today's gaming PC build. What is getting this graphics card installed. Now, of course, if we take a cursory look, loads of room. That's going to fit in easy peasy. But I do need to just remove some hardware first of all. You'll be able to see that there's 3 thumb screws here which are going to fasten the graphics card into place. One slight design oversight that I think there is here is that you can't actually get a screwdriver into these 2 screws. You can get it into this one, just about, but the others you are going to have to use your thumbs. So make sure these aren't too tight when you screw in the PCIe riser. Before then actually installing the GPU. Now make sure the little clip on the riser is detached. Line it up nice and carefully. No need to rush this stage. Before slotting it in, although we seem to have a bit of a problem. Doesn't seem to actually line up. Have I installed the riser wrong?
A few moments later.
By the looks of things, this is actually so adjustable that I've not actually installed it correctly. So I think what I need to do is move this sort of of squarish section up a notch. That's going to then work for triple slot GPUs. Evidently, this wasn't configured for triple slot GPUs before. I mean, feels a little bit over-engineered. Maybe I'm modding for the sake of a few minutes work. But I suppose on the positive side, it is adjustable, it is very configurable, and it is well built. And then the whole thing goes back into the case. Let's try this whole process again. And then let's try all over again to put the GPU in. Is it gonna fit this time? Oh, that didn't sound good. But I think it's in. The only thing left to do now, oh, well, hello, is to try and squeeze in these tiny little screws. Wow, I say tiny screws. They're not tiny, but they're just very awkwardly placed. Certainly a little bit on the fiddly end of the spectrum, but I think that is all in. And I've got to say, it's looking pretty good. All that's left really to do, other than putting all the panels on and configuring the case, is to get the power supply in. Now, I have overdone it slightly with the power supply. That is certainly not something I can deny. This is MSI's MEG AI1300P PCI Gen 5, but they do a 1000 watt version, which I'll link below and would be a better choice. The extra 300 is more useful for like a 4090 combo as opposed to a 4080 combo. Now, inside of here, you get the power supply itself, which is, truth be told, fairly compact, and then you get all of the modular cables. Now, James, what is special about these modular cables? Well, MSI have actually pre-braided pretty much all of them. I say pretty much all of them. The PCI Gen 5 is the only one that still uses the old plastic style sleeving. So add into place all of the modular cables and then slide the PSU into the pre-installed bracket at the back of the case. Fasten this up, plug up all of the wires, and I think we're pretty much there. All that can mean then is it's time to boot this system up to look at performance, but first the aesthetics in the only way we know how. Roll that montage. We've established that this build looks the business, but does it perform equally as strong? Well, let's take a look, shall we, with a wide variety of titles and start off with F1 2022. This is a great test of 4K gaming and leverages both DLSS and ray tracing. Specifically, we're on the ultra high preset with DLSS 3 enabled and RTX set to high. The build pulled in a solid 160 frames per second on average, with decent 90 and 99 percentile results, and the frame rate here was tested using the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode. I also tested titles like COD's Warzone 2 and at 4K high with DLSS set to quality. The build once again pulled in solid frame rates, well over 100 FPS, with 124 on average to be precise. Tuned down to 1080p in titles like Fortnite at competitive settings, and the build is capable of breaking the multiple 100 FPS barrier with an impressive 312 frames per second in Fortnite at competitive settings. Apex Legends also stacked up well, 4K high, and the build achieved just shy of 160 FPS on average, with a 156 average to be precise. Battlefield 2042 also stacks up well, 4K high settings, DLSS enabled on the quality preset again, and the build well excelled 100 FPS with 115 frames per second to be precise. This is a build that really can wear a lot of hats, and whether you're looking to play the latest AAA titles or games that have been around for slightly longer, you can achieve great frame rates at great resolutions with this admittedly very pricey system. You can learn more about all the parts mentioned in today's video, latest pricing and availability at the affiliate links below. Thanks for watching though, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.